Welcome back, Deep Divers. Today, we're going to be tackling some pretty big ideas about how different cultures experience reality.
Right.
We'll be looking at Mircea Eliade's book, The Sacred and the Profane.
Ah, good one.
And, when I was reading this, one of the things that really stuck out to me was how Eliade kind of contrasts the modern world with more traditional societies. The way they saw the world wasn't just one big kind of same old thing.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. I mean, Ali was really fascinated with this idea of how people experience the world as sacred, as
Hmm.
something more than just everyday life.
Hmm.
It's not that these older cultures didn't have routines of the mundane, but they saw breaks in that.
Right.
Special moments or places where reality seemed to kind of, I don't know, almost like crack open and, something else would shine through.
Yeah, those thin places some people talk about, right?
Exactly.
Where it's like the veil between worlds feels thinner.
That's it, yeah. Eliade uses this term, hierophany,
Okay.
to describe these moments where the sacred kind of breaks through into the ordinary world. Think about a church, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the middle of a busy city. You step inside, cross that threshold, and it's almost like you're stepping out of the everyday,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's just for a little while.
Yeah.
That's what we call like a spatial hierophany.
So it's not just about the physical place itself, but like how we perceive it.
Right.
I mean, I've definitely had that feeling in certain places, even
Sure.
if I'm not, particularly religious, like a quiet forest, a grand cathedral, that kind of thing. You just feel a weight of meaning there. Like you're in the presence of something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, it's fascinating how these concepts like stick with us, right?
Mm.
Even if we don't always realize that they kind of shape
Hmm.
how we see the world. But taking a step further, Eliade points out that for traditional societies, their home wasn't just a location. It was the center of the world,
Wow.
like a microcosm of the entire universe.
Whoa, okay. I mean, I'm picturing like a tiny snow globe,
Yeah,
but it's their whole village and it's like everything. Her?
that's the idea. Their home was literally the axis mundi,
Okay.
that central pillar that connects heaven, earth, and the underworld.
Mm-hmm.
It's a symbolic idea,
Mm.
but it shows up in like so many cultures.
Really?
You have Mount Meru in Hinduism, the Kaaba in Islam, even Golgotha in Christianity.
Wow.
Each of them holding that central cosmic significance.
So they all have that same like central point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this amazing detail about the Achilpa people of Australia that Ali describes. They carried a sacred pole with them everywhere they went,
Really?
like a portable axis mundi.
Wow, that's commitment. So they could always feel connected to that, like to that center.
Exactly. Exactly. It speaks to that deep human need for stability,
Hmm.
for feeling grounded in a universe that can feel, so vast,
Yeah.
so chaotic.
Yeah.
It's like no matter where you go, you're tethered to something larger than yourself, something meaningful.
Right.
But, this makes me think part of that feeling of displacement that so many people feel today, that kind of rootlessness,
Mm-hmm.
might be tied to this loss of a defined center.
That's a great point. If we've kind of lost that sense of being anchored to a specific sacred place, maybe that contributes to this feeling of just being adrift.
Yeah.
So if space can be sacred, what about time?
Hmm.
Because Eliade also talks about how religious people experience these breaks in ordinary time,
Yeah.
where they're able to connect with a sort of like primordial time, like time travel, but not in a sci-fi way.
Right, exactly. It's not about physically, you know, going back in time,
Mm-hmm.
but about accessing a different way of experiencing it.
Uh,
He talks about tapping into what he calls Illud Tempus,
mm,
which means that time.
okay.
It's the mythical time of creation when the gods were, active and present.
Right.
And it's accessed through rituals and festivals and things like that.
Okay, so I think I'm starting to get it. So like every New Year's celebration,
Hmm.
it's not just about the calendar, but about like symbolically returning to that moment of
Yeah.
creation, like a reset button for the whole world.
That's a really good way to think about it, yeah. It's about connecting to that original creative energy,
Yeah.
the source of all being. But this makes me think, right, we're so obsessed with linear time today,
Hmm.
deadlines and schedules, and
Right.
has our modern idea of conception of time really liberated us?
Hmm.
Or has it created a different kind of confinement?
That's a great question. It's like we're free from those old rituals and calendars,
Right.
but now we're like slaves to our Google Calendar and our to-do lists.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like we traded one form of confinement for another. And speaking of our, modern world, it seems like we've gotten a lot more detached from nature,
Yeah.
than those traditional societies that Eliade describes.
Sure.
For them, nature wasn't just something to be like exploited or explained.
Right.
It was alive with the sacred.
Absolutely.
Like every element held some kind of divine power.
Right. I think water is such a powerful example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Across so many cultures, it's this potent symbol of creation, dissolution, rebirth, purification. It's there in ancient myths and creation stories and, rituals like baptism. We even see it in our own language, right? We talk about washing away our sins,
Mm-hmm.
feeling cleansed after a, good cry.
It's true. We still use that language, even if we don't like consciously think about it. But
Yeah.
but now we're in this, age of science where we're constantly trying to like control and explain nature.
Right.
Do you think we've really managed to desacralize nature, or is that like primal awe still there, just kind of lurking beneath the surface?
That's such an intriguing thought, isn't it? I mean, even as we seek those scientific explanations,
Yeah.
there's a part of us that still responds to the grandeur of a storm
Right.
or the tranquility of a forest.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the sacred in nature just manifests differently for us now.
Okay.
It's less about gods in the trees and more about that deep visceral connection to the natural world that we still feel, even if we don't always
Yeah.
acknowledge it.
So there's still that sense of mystery and wonder, but it's
Right.
just expressed differently.
Yeah.
And taking this even further, Eliade argues that for traditional societies, even our bodies, our basic functions,
Mm.
could become rituals reflecting these cosmic processes.
He uses examples like eating
Right.
or even sexuality,
Okay.
which becomes a kind of, sacred marriage.
Yes.
A symbolic union of opposites.
Mhm.
He even describes the human body as a microcosm of the universe, this little world reflecting the order of the larger cosmos.
Okay, this is where my mind starts to get blown. So
Yeah.
like nothing is purely mundane. Everything is potentially connected to a larger sacred reality.
Exactly. Every action, every experience can become a way of participating in that greater cosmic drama.
And this brings us to a crucial point, I think, which is that, Iliad recognizes that the modern world is seeing a rise in people who don't subscribe to those traditional religions.
Right.
And he doesn't shy away from what that shift might mean.
Okay, so let's dive into that. What happens when we lose that connection to the sacred? Is it all doom and gloom, or is there something else going on?
Right. Yeah, it's a really interesting question, isn't it? On the one hand, there's this new kind of freedom that comes with, stepping outside of those traditional structures.
But then there's also the potential for meaninglessness.
Mm-hmm.
That feeling of being adrift in a world that just seems, I don't know, stripped of any kind of deeper significance.
Right.
And that's something that Eliade really grapples with in the book.
Yeah, so he acknowledges both sides of the coin.
Right.
Like the potential and the pitfalls. I mean that makes sense, right? When you're no longer bound by those old rules and rituals, it's exciting but also kind of terrifying. It's like, okay, now what? What do I do with all this freedom?
Exactly. And that's a great question. And I think it gets to the heart of what Eliade calls the modern predicament.
Okay.
But before we go there, I think it's helpful to kind of look at how those traditional societies, how they viewed even most basic human actions as sacred rituals.
Right.
We were talking about eating and sexuality in the last part, but it goes even further than that.
Right, like all those rituals around hunting and farming and things that Eliade talks about. It's wild how these things that seem, so practical, so down to earth, could become like imbued with such deep meaning.
Exactly. And it's not just limited to a few cultures. This is something you see across like a wide range of societies. For them, it wasn't just about sustenance or survival. It was about connecting those activities to the sacred rhythms of the cosmos.
Wow.
Like when you plant a seed, you're not just putting something in the ground. You're participating in this grand cycle of life, death, and rebirth.
It's like every action has this like ripple effect
Yeah,
connecting you to something much bigger than yourself.
it's
That's so different from how most of us view our jobs today. It's like, ugh, another Monday morning, got to grind it out, you know?
it is a very different perspective.
Yeah.
I think it speaks to like a fundamental shift in worldview. For traditional societies, there wasn't this sharp division between the sacred and the profane, the spiritual and the material.
Right.
Everything was potentially imbued with religious significance. And this brings us back to that idea of mythical time or looted tempest that we touched on earlier.
Right. That concept of time being cyclical always, like
Yeah.
returning to that mythical moment of creation.
Hmm.
It's almost like a built-in like cosmic reassurance, right?
Yeah.
No matter what happens in your individual life, you know that the universe is eternally renewing itself.
Exactly. And I think that's a really crucial point. For traditional societies, this cyclical view of time,
Mm-hmm.
it provided a sense of security and meaning.
Mm.
They weren't just isolated individuals moving through time. They were part of a grand cosmic drama,
Mm-hmm.
reenacting the events of
Mm.
creation, participating in this eternal cycle.
So even though like their lives were probably full of hardship and uncertainty and all that, they had this framework, this like framework that gave them a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. It's
Exact.
almost like you said, a form of time travel where every ritual, every festival is a chance to step back into that primordial time, to
Mm-hmm.
reconnect with the source of all being.
Yes. And I think that's a beautiful way to think about it.
Yeah.
But then the question becomes, what happens when that connection to the sacred is lysed?
Right.
What happens when that framework collapses? And that's where Eliade's discussion of the modern, non-religious individual becomes so relevant.
Mm-hmm.
He saw this as a major shift,
Yeah.
one with both, exciting possibilities and significant risks.
Okay, I can see that. On the one hand, you're free from those old like dogmas and restrictions,
Right.
but then what fills that void? You know, if you no longer have those rituals and myths to give you meaning,
Mhm.
how do you make sense of the world? How do you find your place in it?
And that's where Eliade's concept of the terror of history comes in.
All right, let's dive into that. What exactly does he mean by the terror of history? It sounds pretty intense.
It is a powerful concept.
Yeah.
Eliade argued that for those traditional societies that, with their cyclical view of time, there was a sense of cosmic security.
Mm-hmm.
But in the modern world, with its linear view of time and its emphasis on individual achievement and progress, that sense of security is often lost.
Right.
We become like acutely aware of our own mortality, of the fact that our lives are finite,
Right.
that they have a beginning and an end.
Yeah.
And this can be terrifying.
Wow, yeah. I'm feeling that terror just thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's like we're so focused on our own individual timelines, our own little like narratives that we lose sight of that larger cosmic story. And suddenly it's just us like hurtling toward oblivion. It's heavy stuff.
It is heavy stuff, but I think Eliade was really trying to get at something essential about the human experience here.
Mm-hmm.
It's that tension between our awareness of our own mortality and our longing for something that transcends it.
Yeah.
Something that gives our lives meaning and purpose
Yeah.
beyond just our individual existence.
So it's not just about being afraid of death. It's about being afraid of meaninglessness.
Right.
Like what's the point of it all if it just if it just ends,
Yeah.
there's no grand plan, no like ultimate purpose. That's a scary thought.
It is a scary thought, and
Yeah.
and I think a lot of the anxiety and unease that we see in the modern world can be traced back to this sense of we've lost those old narratives, those old ways of making sense of the world,
Mm-hmm.
but we haven't necessarily found anything to replace them. But here's the thing: Eliade wasn't just a pessimist. He also offered some glimmers of hope.
Okay.
He believed that even in a secularized world, we can still find ways to experience the sacred,
Mm.
to connect with something larger than ourselves.
Okay. That's good to hear because I was starting to feel a bit hopeless there.
Mhm.
So what are those glimmers of hope? What are those ways to kind of reconnect with the sacred in a world that seems to have, lost its magic.
Well, Eliade pointed to a few things. First, he emphasized the enduring power of art, music, literature.
Mm-hmm.
He saw these as ways to access experiences of beauty, transcendence, connection that go beyond the purely material.
Okay.
It's like when you're really moved by a piece of art or
Uh-huh.
you're lost in a piece of music,
Right.
you get a glimpse of something bigger, something beyond yourself.
Yeah.
And even though it's not tied to any specific religion, it can still be a profoundly sacred experience.
I get that. Like when you hear a song that just perfectly captures like a feeling you've had,
Hmm.
or you see a painting that just, takes your breath away. It's like, whoa, how did they do that?
Right.
There's a mystery there, a sense of awe. And it's not just about beauty either. Sometimes it's about being confronted with something difficult, something that makes you, think about the world in a new way.
You're exactly right. And Eliade also saw nature as a potential source of the sacred,
Mm-hmm.
even if we don't view it through a strictly religious lens.
Okay.
There's something about experiencing the vastness of the ocean or the power of a thunderstorm that can evoke a sense of awe and wonder.
Right.
A feeling of being connected to something much, much larger than ourselves.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. I remember hiking in the mountains once, and I just had this overwhelming feeling of being like small, but also like part of something incredibly grand and ancient.
Yeah.
It was like all my worries just kind of melted away, and I just felt this deep sense of peace and belonging.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about believing in a particular god or anything. It was just this pure visceral experience. So it's not about clinging to like outdated rituals or beliefs. It's about being open to those moments of awe and wonder, those experiences that kind of lift us out of the everyday and connect us to something bigger, something transcendent.
Exactly. And it's also about being intentional, about creating our own rituals and practices that give our lives meaning and purpose.
Okay.
We don't have to wait for some external authority to tell us what's sacred.
Right.
We can create our own sacred spaces and moments in our lives.
So we're not just passive recipients of meaning. We're active creators of it, and that's really empowering.
It is.
I'm starting to see how Eliade's ideas can be like applied to our modern lives, even if we don't consider ourselves religious. But there's still that question of how we deal with that terror of history,
Right.
that anxiety that comes from knowing that our lives are finite.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean I do. Yeah, I mean I do. It's a big one, isn't it? How do we face that feeling of our lives being finite?
Yeah, I mean it's easy to get caught up in that, in that feeling of like, what's the point? Especially when we've been, talking about these grand cosmic ideas of the sacred,
No, exactly.
Yeah.
It is a big question, and I don't think there are any easy answers.
Uh,
But I do think Eliade offers some interesting perspectives. He suggests that one way to kind of combat that terror of history, that feeling of meaninglessness,
Yeah.
is to find ways to participate in something larger than ourselves.
So like finding a purpose, like a mission, something that gives your life a sense of continuity even after you're gone.
Exactly.
Something that connects you to a larger story.
That's it. It could be a social cause you're passionate about,
Mm-hmm.
a creative pursuit,
Right.
or even just a deep commitment to your relationships with others.
Okay.
The point is to find something that gives your life a sense of meaning that extends beyond your own individual existence. It's like, weaving your own thread into the larger tapestry of human experience.
I love that analogy. It's not about, denying our mortality, but about finding ways to make our lives matter.
Right.
Leave a positive mark on the world.
Exactly.
And in a way, it's like we're creating our own myths,
Yeah.
our own narratives that give our lives meaning.
I think you're onto something there.
Right.
And these aren't just, arbitrary stories.
Right.
They're grounded in our values, our experiences, our passions. They're the stories that we choose to tell ourselves
Mm-hmm.
about
Yeah.
who we are and what our lives are about. But, before we get too carried away with creating our own personal myths,
Right.
I think it's important to kind of circle back to something we touched on earlier. Eliade's concept of the modern predicament.
Oh, right. That's where we were going before we got into the terror of history and all that.
Exactly, yeah.
So what is this predicament? Is it all doom and gloom, or is there some hope there too?
Well, it's definitely complex. Eliade recognized
Yeah.
that for many people in the modern world, those old ways of experiencing the sacred, they just no longer resonated.
Hmm.
Traditional religions were losing their grip, and people were searching for new sources of meaning and purpose.
So does that mean the sacred is just gone? Or does it just show up in different ways?
That's the key point.
Mm.
Eliade argued that the human need for the sacred, that longing for something transcendent, doesn't just disappear.
Hmm.
It simply seeks new outlets.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like that old saying, nature abhors a vacuum. If
Mhm.
if one thing disappears, something else rushes in to fill that space.
Exactly. And Eliade pointed to a few possibilities for what might fill that void. One is the rise of secular ideologies,
Okay.
like Marxism,
Yeah.
which we talked about a bit earlier.
Right.
These often function in a similar way to traditional religions.
Hmm.
They offer grand narratives,
Hmm.
a sense of purpose,
Okay.
even a vision of a future utopia.
Hmm.
Think about the fervor of political movement,
Yeah.
the devotion to certain causes.
Yeah.
It's like that religious impulse is being channeled into a different arena.
So even if we like reject traditional religion, we might still be drawn to other belief systems that fulfill that same like psychological need for meaning.
Right.
That's a bit unsettling, to be honest.
You know,
It's like no matter how hard we try to be like rational and scientific,
Mhm.
we still crave like something bigger than ourselves.
I think that's a really insightful observation.
Yeah.
And Eliade saw this as a potential danger.
Okay.
He recognized that these secular ideologies, while promising liberation,
Mhm.
could easily become just as dogmatic and oppressive
Yeah.
as the religions they sought to
Right.
replace.
Right.
Just look at history.
Right.
So many atrocities have been committed in the name of political ideologies.
That's a chilling thought. It's like we're constantly searching for something to believe in,
Hmm.
something to give our lives meaning, but we also have to be careful not to get swept away by those beliefs,
Yeah. Right.
to lose our critical thinking skills. It's a delicate balance.
It is a delicate balance, and this is where I think Eliade's emphasis on critical thinking becomes so important. He believed that we need to be constantly, questioning our assumptions,
Mm-hmm.
examining the underlying structures of our beliefs,
Yeah.
and being open to alternative perspectives. It's not about rejecting all forms of meaning making. It's
Yeah.
about being more conscious and deliberate about the meaning we choose to embrace.
So it's not about becoming cynical or nihilistic or anything like that. It's about being more aware, more discerning. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I have this need to believe in something, but what are the implications of that belief?
Right.
Does it lead to greater compassion and understanding?
Right.
Or does it lead to division and conflict?
Precisely. And this brings us to another possibility that Eliade explored, which is the potential for rediscovering the sacred in the everyday.
Okay, this is something we touched on in the last part, and I'm really intrigued by this idea.
Mm-hmm.
How can we find the sacred in a world that seems so mundane, so focused on the material?
Well, Eliade argued that even in the most ordinary aspects of life, we can find glimpses of something transcendent.
Mm-hmm.
He pointed to things like art, music, literature,
Right.
even simple acts of love and kindness.
Mm-hmm.
These can all provide us with experiences of beauty, connection, meaning
Yeah.
that go beyond the purely material.
Right.
It's like those moments where you're suddenly struck by the beauty of a sunset, or you feel a surge of gratitude for the people in your life.
Mm-hmm.
They're these little flashes of the sacred that remind us that there's more to life than just the everyday grind.
It's like shifting your perspective, paying attention to those moments that spark a sense of awe and wonder, even in the midst of your daily routine. It's
Right.
about being present, being mindful, noticing the little things that make life feel rich and meaningful.
You're getting it.
Yeah.
And it's also about being intentional about creating sacred spaces and moments in your life.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be anything, elaborate or complicated.
Right.
It can be something as simple as setting aside time for quiet reflection, creating a beautiful garden, or engaging in a meaningful conversation with a loved one.
Right.
The key is to find activities and practices that nourish your soul and connect you to something larger than yourself.
So you don't have to be like religious in the traditional sense to experience the sacred. You
Yeah.
can create your own forms of meaning and ritual
Hmm.
that are relevant to your modern life.
Exactly.
And that's really liberating. It's like, okay, the old ways, they might not work for me,
Right.
but that doesn't mean I have to like live in a purely profane world.
Hmm.
I can find my own ways to connect to something bigger, something that gives my life meaning and purpose.
That's a powerful realization.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Eliade's work offers a real sense of hope.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't, naive about the challenges of modern life. But he also believed in our capacity to create meaning, to cultivate the sacred, to find a sense of purpose, even amidst the uncertainty and complexity of the world.
Okay, so let's bring this all together. What are the key takeaways from our deep dive into Eliade's the sacred and the profane?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that the human need for the sacred, for something that transcends the ordinary,
Mm-hmm.
is fundamental. It's enduring.
Mm,
Even as traditional religions decline,
right.
we still seek ways to connect with something larger than ourselves, to find meaning and purpose in our lives.
And we've seen how this search can take, so many forms,
Yeah.
from secular ideologies
Mhm.
to a renewed appreciation for the beauty and wonder of everyday life. And what's really struck me is that it's not about, finding the one right answer.
Right.
It's about being mindful of that search, examining our own beliefs and assumptions, and being open to new ways of experiencing the sacred that resonate with us.
You've really captured the essence of it, and I think Eliade would be thrilled to hear you say that. He was a passionate advocate for critical thinking and intellectual exploration.
Hmm.
He challenged us to become, active participants in creating a world that's infused with meaning and purpose,
Mm.
rather than, passively accepting the status quo.
All right.
And on that note, I think we can leave our listeners with one final provocative thought.
Oh, I love a good cliffhanger. What's the thought?
If the traditional forms of the sacred no longer resonate for us, what new forms might we create? What
Hmm.
will the sacred look like in the future?
Yeah.
That's something for each of us to ponder as we navigate our own journeys through this complex and ever-changing world.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into Mircea Eliade's The Sacred and the Profane. Thanks for joining us on this intellectual adventure, everyone. We hope you found it as thought-provoking as we have.